A call for pizza. It was a chilly Wednesday evening in early October, and Officer Sarah Martinez sat in her corner of the 911 dispatch center. The hum of the radios, the flashing lights of the control panel, and the quiet yet constant bustle of her colleagues were all background noise she had become accustomed to in her 12 years on the job. For Sarah, who had been the steady voice on the other end of thousands of calls, some frantic, some mundane, and some tragic, this place felt like a second home. But tonight, something would shake her well-honed sense of routine, and it would all start with the innocent voice of a 4-year-old boy. Just a few minutes before her shift was due to end, Sarah leaned back, her mind beginning to drift to her own 2 children at home. Halloween was coming up, and she promised to help them carve pumpkins that night. The idea of her little ones in costumes made her smile, until her headset buzzed, snapping her back to attention. The call came in at exactly 7:43 p.m. Sarah adjusted her microphone as she answered, her voice calm and professional. 911, what's your emergency? There was a pause, and then a child's voice spoke. Hi, I'd like to order a big pizza, please, the voice said, surprisingly clear and earnest for someone so young. Sarah's lips curved into a faint smile. Prank calls from children weren't uncommon, but her instinct told her to pause, to listen. There was something off. She didn't disconnect, as she might have done if she thought this was a straightforward joke. Something about the boy's tone, the slight tremor behind his words, made her stay on the line. This is 911. Sweetheart, Sarah replied gently. We don't usually take pizza orders. Are you trying to order dinner? Yes, please. My mom says it has to be a giant one with extra cheese, he replied, his voice small but oddly insistent. A flicker of worry flared in Sarah's mind. It was subtle, but her gut, sharpened over years of experience, told her there was more going on. She kept her voice casual. Can you tell me your name, honey? I'm Tommy. I'm 4, he whispered. In the background, Sarah heard muffled sounds, voices, but not distinct words. That's great, Tommy. Are you at home right now? She asked, typing his responses into the system with one hand while pressing an alert button on her console with the other, signaling her supervisor. Yes, he said, his voice a bit louder now. We need the pizza right away. Mom says it's really, really important. Sarah's hand stilled on the keyboard. The urgency, the way the little boy repeated the message, it felt like a signal. This was no simple request. She made a note to keep him on the line, and her voice softened even further. All right, Tommy, you're doing a great job talking to me. Can you tell me what kind of toppings you want on your pizza? Tommy hesitated, as though he'd been asked a hard question. Then he whispered, just cheese. My mom doesn't like the man here, and he's really, really mean. He went quiet, then added, Mom's crying. She said we needed the pizza right away. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, tracing the call to get a location as she signaled her supervisor with a new level of urgency. Tommy was speaking again, his voice even quieter than before. Mom said it's a special pizza order if there's trouble. What a good idea, Sarah replied, her voice steady, her fingers typing. And you did exactly what she asked. Just stay on the line with me, okay? Sarah took a deep breath. Her mind raced as she tried to gather as much information as possible. Tommy, is there someone in the house who's not supposed to be there? Yes, Tommy whispered back. Daddy's here. He broke the picture frame. Sarah's pulse quickened. Tommy, do you know where your mom is right now? She's with him in the living room. She told me to hide. Tommy's voice was barely audible now, and Sarah had to strain to hear him. She sent out a call for officers to respond to the address she traced, marking it as a priority. You're doing such a brave job, Tommy, she said, choosing her words carefully. Stay where you are, okay? Just keep talking to me until I tell you it's okay to stop. In the background, she heard more sounds, something that sounded like breaking glass, and the low rumble of a man's angry voice. Tommy took a shaky breath, and Sarah felt a pang of urgency she hadn't felt in a long time. "I want my pizza now," he whispered, his voice desperate. "Tommy, you're so brave," Sarah repeated, focusing her energy on reassuring him. "The officers are on their way, and they're bringing your special pizza. It might be a little loud when they arrive, but don't be scared, okay? They're there to help you and your mom." Tommy seemed to relax slightly, reassured by her words. "Will they really bring a pizza?" Sarah felt a small smile break through her tension. "Tell you what, Tommy, when you're safe, I'll make sure you get that pizza. Deal?" "Deal," he whispered, and then he went quiet again, the sounds of the angry man's voice fading in and out in the background. As she kept him on the line, she watched the progress of the officers on her screen, tracking them as they neared the apartment complex. Her heart pounded in time with the flashing lights on her console, each second feeling like an eternity. Sarah felt an overwhelming sense of admiration for the boy on the line with her. It took a lot of courage for someone so young to call 911, especially when he likely didn't fully understand the situation. And she realized it took an incredible amount of forethought from his mother to prepare him for this moment. When she finally heard the first officer's voice crackle over her headset, announcing their arrival, Sarah's shoulders relaxed a fraction. She could see the officers' locations on her screen, confirming they were at the address she'd sent them to. They were there, and she knew they would do everything in their power to help this little boy and his mother. "Tommy," she said gently, "I think your pizza is almost here. Just keep staying quiet where you are. An officer will find you soon." "Okay," he whispered, sounding calmer now. "Thank you, pizza lady." Sarah smiled, even as her heart broke a little. "You're welcome, Tommy." In the background, she heard the telltale sound of doors being breached, loud and abrupt, followed by shouts from the officers. The call ended abruptly as the officers swept into the apartment, but Sarah remained seated at her station, her eyes glued to the screen, waiting for an update on the family she had become so invested in. Finally, after what felt like a lifetime, her headset crackled to life. "Dispatch, this is Officer Chen. We have a small child safe and secure, and the mother is with us as well." Relief washed over Sarah, and she let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "We also found, let's just say there's more to this scene than we anticipated. The hidden code." Officer Sarah Martinez barely had a chance to catch her breath before another call came through her console. This one was from Officer James Chen, who had just arrived at the apartment where Tommy and his mother, Jennifer Watson, lived. The voice on the other end was firm, but tinged with disbelief, as though even he was struggling to process what he was seeing. "Sarah, we need to talk about what we found here," Officer Chen began, his tone urgent. "Are they safe?" she asked, her mind still on Tommy's soft voice over the call, asking her if the pizza was coming. "Yes, Tommy and his mother are both safe. The father's been restrained, but—" Chen hesitated. "There's something you should know. This wasn't just a routine call. The kid didn't just dial 911 randomly. His mother set this up." Sarah's fingers gripped the edge of her console as Chen described the scene in painstaking detail. Inside the small apartment, everything looked typical at first glance: a few scattered toys, a warm glow from a reading lamp, and photographs of Tommy and his mother taped to the walls. But in one corner of the kitchen, partially hidden behind a refrigerator, they had found a small makeshift hiding spot, perfectly sized for a child. It was simple but smart, a partially concealed alcove with a dish towel draped over it that camouflaged the small space where Tommy had crouched during his call. The police found a small backpack with a water bottle, some snacks, and a stuffed dinosaur inside, as well as an emergency cell phone, pre-dialed to 911. Officer Chen continued, "It's like she prepared him for this moment, Sarah. We also found a list of emergency instructions, written out with kid-friendly pictures. The kid knew exactly what to do because she taught him." A chill ran down Sarah's spine, This wasn't just a case of a frightened mother and her child. It was a survival plan, carefully, painfully thought out in advance. Sarah could imagine Jennifer huddling with her son, rehearsing these steps, teaching him how to stay calm, when to make the call, and how to communicate in code. This wasn't something someone did lightly. It was the kind of thing a mother did when she had no choice, when the fear became a constant undercurrent of her everyday life. Sarah. Chen's voice snapped her back to the present. There's more. Her breath caught. More. We found additional items in the father's car. Duct tape, rope, and a note with Jennifer and Tommy's names on it. His voice turned cold, each word punctuated with anger. He had plans for them, Sarah. If Tommy hadn't called when he did. Chen didn't need to finish the sentence. Sarah's heart twisted as she thought about what could have happened if Tommy hadn't made that call, if Jennifer hadn't been brave enough to teach her son how to reach out for help in such a dangerous situation. It was hard for Sarah to imagine just how much terror Jennifer must have endured to take that step, to prepare her child in case his father ever came back. So, she taught him to say pizza as a code for an emergency. Sarah asked, replaying the call in her head and thinking of the urgency in Tommy's voice. Yes, Chen confirmed. Jennifer explained that she needed a way for Tommy to reach out for help without alerting his father if he ever came back. She told him that if he ever needed help, he should call 911 and ask for a giant pizza with extra cheese. The idea was to make it sound like an innocent mistake, something a 4-year-old might say without raising suspicion. But she taught him that pizza meant he needed help, that it was an emergency. As the reality of it set in, Sarah's admiration for Jennifer grew. Jennifer wasn't just trying to protect her child. She was arming him with the tools to protect himself in a situation where she might be powerless. It was the kind of resilience that Sarah rarely saw, and the kind that reminded her of why she'd chosen this line of work in the first place. In the quiet moments after the call, Sarah found herself tracing back through the details Jennifer must have considered. She kept a second cell phone hidden for Tommy, knowing it might be the only way to call for help. She created a safe space for him to hide, and she'd thought of a code, a simple word, pizza, that her son could remember, one that wouldn't arouse suspicion. Her thoughts were interrupted by a tap on her shoulder. It was her supervisor, her brows knit with concern as she glanced at the glowing screen that displayed the details of Tommy's call. Sarah, I think you should go check on them, her supervisor said quietly. It sounds like this case is going to need more than just a police response. Nodding, Sarah closed out her console, grabbed her coat, and prepared to leave the dispatch center. She couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of something much larger than she'd anticipated. In her car, she drove through the quiet suburban streets, mentally piecing together what she would say to Tommy and his mother. She'd answered countless calls in her career, some horrifying, some sad, and some that haunted her dreams, but this call was different. She knew it wasn't just about answering a cry for help. It was about honoring the courage of a mother who had done everything in her power to protect her son. When Sarah arrived at the apartment complex, she saw a few police cruisers still parked outside, their lights flashing softly against the brick facade of the building. She felt a sense of resolve as she walked toward the stairwell leading to Jennifer and Tommy's apartment. Inside, the scene was calm but tense. Officer Chen was speaking with another officer as Sarah entered, his face a mixture of relief and lingering anger over what had nearly happened here. He gave her a small nod, acknowledging her presence. Sarah, he said, walking over to her, they're in the neighbor's apartment across the hall. Jennifer's been through a lot, but she's holding it together for her son. And the kid. Chen's expression softened. He's a brave one. She nodded, bracing herself as she approached the door. She could hear muffled voices and the faint sounds of a child chattering. When she knocked, the door opened, revealing Jennifer, a woman in her early 30s, with a slight build, her eyes red from crying, but her face calm. Tommy stood beside her, clutching his stuffed dinosaur and looking up at Sarah with wide eyes. "Hi," Sarah said softly, crouching down to meet his gaze. "You must be Tommy. I'm the lady you spoke with on the phone." Tommy's eyes lit up with recognition, and a shy smile broke through his nervous expression. "You're the pizza lady." "Yes, I am," Sarah said, giving him a warm smile. "You did such an amazing job, Tommy. You're a real hero. You know that." Tommy nodded, the weight of her words still too big for him to fully understand. But he held his mother's hand tightly, seeking her reassurance. Jennifer glanced at Sarah, a grateful but exhausted expression crossing her face. "Thank you," Jennifer said quietly, her voice raw, "for staying with him on the call. I don't know if he would have stayed calm without you." Sarah reached out, gently touching Jennifer's shoulder. "You did everything right, Jennifer. Teaching him the code, keeping him safe. It takes a lot of courage to do what you did." Jennifer's gaze dropped to her son, her expression softening. "I didn't know what else to do. I couldn't let him grow up in fear, but I couldn't ignore the possibility that his father would try to come back. I had to prepare him somehow, just in case." Tommy looked up at his mother, listening intently to the adults' conversation, sensing the seriousness of their words. Sarah noticed and gave him a reassuring smile. "You know what, Tommy?" she said, her voice full of admiration. "Not everyone can be as brave as you were tonight. You helped your mom in a big way." Tommy smiled bashfully, gripping his dinosaur a little tighter. With a supportive arm around Jennifer, Sarah led her to a small chair by the door. "I know this is overwhelming, but I want you to know that we're here to help. There are resources, counseling, whatever you need to make sure both you and Tommy stay safe." Jennifer nodded, her gaze distant as she processed everything that had just happened. "I didn't expect it to go this far," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I thought maybe he would come around, apologize, and move on. But when I saw him, I knew he was here to hurt us." Sarah nodded, listening as Jennifer recounted the fear she'd been living with since her ex-husband's release from prison. Every day, she had been haunted by the uncertainty, wondering if he would come back, wondering if the restraining order would be enough. And each night, when she tucked Tommy into bed, she hoped he wouldn't have to use the plan she'd taught him. "Your instinct kept you both safe tonight," Sarah said, her voice gentle but firm. "You did the right thing by preparing Tommy, and he did exactly what you taught him. We'll make sure this never happens again." Jennifer's hand tightened around Tommy's, and he looked up at her, his blue eyes full of a trust that tugged at Sarah's heart. A moment later, Officer Chen joined them. "We're taking him in now," he said, referring to Tommy's father. "He won't be coming back here, Jennifer. You and Tommy are safe now." Jennifer nodded, exhaling a deep sigh of relief, and her shoulders sagged as the weight of the fear she'd been carrying seemed to slip away. Sarah stayed by their side until the officers finished processing the scene and left, offering comforting words and small reassurances. After the police had left, Sarah sat with Jennifer and Tommy a little longer. She couldn't bring herself to leave until she was sure they were okay, both mother and son settling back into a semblance of calm. As she finally got up to leave, she felt a tug on her sleeve. She looked down to see Tommy gazing up at her with a curious expression. "Are you going to bring me a pizza?" he asked, his small voice filled with the innocent curiosity of a child. Sarah chuckled, her heart lightening. "You know what, Tommy? I think you've earned the biggest pizza in town. And I'll make sure it has extra cheese, just like you asked." With a smile, Sarah waved goodbye, her mind racing with thoughts of the implications of what had happened tonight. She knew she'd be seeing Tommy and Jennifer again. Their story was far from over. The world needed to hear about their bravery and resilience. This one call had set something in motion, and Sarah felt an unwavering resolve to be part of it. As she walked down the apartment building's quiet hallway, her thoughts filled with ideas. This wasn't just a story of survival, it was a call to action. The pizza protocol takes shape. The morning sun filtered through her blinds, casting long shadows across the floor as Sarah sat at her kitchen table, nursing a cup of strong coffee. Her thoughts lingered on the events from the previous night. The fear in Jennifer's voice, the bravery of a 4-year-old boy who'd made a call that likely saved both their lives. She knew it would be a call she'd never forget. But more than that, she knew it was a call that meant something bigger than she could fully grasp yet. As Sarah stared at the steam rising from her mug, an idea began to form in her mind. What if other families could be given the same tools that Jennifer had used with Tommy? What if there was a simple way for children to reach out in emergencies without alerting a dangerous person nearby? It wouldn't be foolproof, but it could be a start, something that might just make the difference in a life-or-death situation. She took another sip of coffee and grabbed her phone. It was early, but she needed to talk this through with someone who'd understand. She dialed Officer Chen's number, and after a couple of rings, he picked up, sounding groggy. "Sarah, it's barely 7 a.m. Is everything all right?" "James," she began, excitement and urgency making her words tumble out in a rush. "I can't stop thinking about that call last night. About Tommy and Jennifer and how they had a code for him to call for help. I keep thinking, what if we could help other families do the same? What if there was a way to teach kids like Tommy how to reach out for help without making it obvious?" There was a long pause on the other end as Chen processed what she was saying. "You mean, like a protocol? Something simple, like the pizza code?" "Yes, exactly like that," Sarah replied, her voice brimming with enthusiasm. "Think about it. If more parents had a code word like that, one their kids could use with 911 operators, we could prevent a lot of these situations from escalating. We could train our dispatchers to recognize when a child says certain words, and we could respond immediately." Sarah could practically hear the gears turning in Chen's mind as he considered her idea. "I think you're onto something," he finally said. "We've both seen so many cases where kids were caught in dangerous situations and didn't know how to reach out for help. If we could give them a way to communicate without fear of being overheard, it could be huge." They discussed the concept for nearly an hour, brainstorming ways to make it work. By the time they hung up, they had a rough outline in mind, a blueprint for what Sarah tentatively called the pizza protocol. Chen promised to bring it up in his next meeting with the police chief, and Sarah planned to speak to her supervisor about implementing a small pilot program within the dispatch center. The following week, Sarah sat down with her supervisor, a woman named Linda with a reputation for being both practical and compassionate. Linda listened intently as Sarah outlined her idea, occasionally nodding and asking questions. When Sarah finished, Linda leaned back in her chair, tapping a pen thoughtfully against her notebook. "It's ambitious, Sarah," she began slowly. "Training dispatchers to recognize code words, especially in the middle of stressful calls, will take time and resources. But," she paused, a small smile creeping onto her face, "I think it's exactly the kind of program that could make a real difference. It's not every day we come across something that could save lives just by teaching children a few words. If you're willing to put in the extra work, I'll support you in pushing this forward." Relief and gratitude washed over Sarah, and she left the office feeling more determined than ever. She knew the road ahead would be long. There would be meetings, presentations, countless hours of planning, but she was ready. For Tommy, for Jennifer, and for every other child out there who might one day need to ask for help without being able to say the words directly. Over the next few weeks, Sarah and Chen worked tirelessly on the framework for the pizza protocol. They developed training modules for dispatchers, teaching them how to recognize potential code words and pick up on subtle cues in a caller's voice. They practiced using various phrases that could serve as code words for help. "I'd like to order a pizza. I need extra cheese. And can I get a large pizza with everything on it?" The phrases were all designed to sound like harmless requests, the kind of things a child might ask for without raising suspicion from an abusive adult. To help refine the program, they reached out to Jennifer, asking if she'd be willing to share her story and offer insights on how she'd trained Tommy. Jennifer agreed, though it was clear she felt nervous about revisiting such a traumatic time. Sarah met her at a quiet coffee shop one afternoon, hoping to make the conversation as comfortable as possible. Jennifer looked visibly drained as she stirred her tea, her gaze distant. "I don't know if I'm the best person to advise on this," she said softly. "I did what I did out of pure fear. I didn't have a guide or a protocol. I just wanted to protect him in any way I could." "But that's exactly why we need your insight, Jennifer," Sarah replied gently. "You made something incredible out of a horrible situation. You taught Tommy how to stay calm, how to reach out for help in a way that wouldn't alert his father. You're the reason he knew what to do that night. If we can share what you did with other parents, we could help so many families." Jennifer was quiet for a moment, and then she nodded slowly. "If it means no other mother has to go through what we did, then yes, I'll help." They spent the next hour going over details, how Jennifer had approached the topic with Tommy, the specific words she used, the practice calls they'd done to reinforce the routine. Jennifer explained that she had framed it as a game, telling Tommy they were practicing for a superhero mission. That way, he wouldn't feel frightened or overwhelmed, and he'd be more likely to remember what to do if the time ever came. "It wasn't easy," Jennifer admitted, her voice thick with emotion. "There were nights I couldn't sleep, thinking about what I was asking him to do, but I knew it was necessary. I had to trust that he would remember when it mattered." With Jennifer's input, Sarah and Chen finalized the structure of the pizza protocol. They developed a training guide for dispatchers, complete with role-play exercises and scenarios to help them recognize when a child might be using code words. They also created pamphlets for parents, explaining how to teach their children about the protocol in a way that was empowering rather than frightening. The pamphlets included suggested phrases, tips for role-playing the call as a game, and a reminder to always have a backup plan, a second phone, a designated hiding spot, a trusted adult who could be called in case of emergency. Word of the pizza protocol spread quickly within the department, and soon, officers, dispatchers, and community outreach coordinators were involved in the effort. Local businesses got wind of the program as well, and one of the first to offer support was Tony's Pizzeria, a local favorite owned by Chen's brother. Tony, a jovial man with a booming laugh, was enthusiastic about the idea and eager to help in any way he could. "Anything for the kids," he told Chen one evening, slapping his brother on the back with a grin. "I'll even throw in a free slice for every family that signs up." With Tony's support, the pizza protocol gained a local headquarters where training sessions and informational meetings could be held. It wasn't long before other businesses joined in, offering safe spaces for children who might need a place to go if they felt unsafe at home. Tony's Pizzeria became the first of many establishments displaying a small sticker in their window, a red pizza slice with a blue police badge in the center, a symbol of safety, a place where help was only a code word away. As the program gained traction, Sarah found herself fielding calls from schools, parent groups, and social services organizations, all eager to learn more. She and Chen became frequent speakers at community events, sharing Tommy's story and teaching others how to implement the protocol in their own homes. It was exhausting work, but it was also deeply fulfilling. One Saturday morning, Sarah was invited to present the pizza protocol at a community safety fair. She stood on a small stage in the local park, speaking to a crowd of parents, children, and local officials. She shared the story of Tommy's call, of Jennifer's bravery and foresight, and the way a single call for pizza had saved 2 lives. The crowd listened intently, and when Sarah finished, there was a moment of silence before applause erupted, echoing across the park. Later that day, a young mother approached Sarah, her little girl clinging shyly to her side. "Thank you for sharing that story," the woman said, her eyes bright with unused tears. "I'm a single mom, and sometimes it feels like there's no safety net, no one to turn to if things go wrong. But hearing about Tommy and Jennifer, it gives me hope. I'm going to teach my daughter the code word, and I just wanted to say thank you." Sarah's throat tightened, and she smiled, squeezing the woman's hand. "You're very welcome. And just know, you're not alone. There are people here who want to help." As she watched the mother and daughter walk away, Sarah felt a surge of purpose that went beyond any job title or promotion. The Pizza Protocol wasn't just a program. It was a lifeline, a way for vulnerable families to feel a little less alone, a little more empowered. The success of the Pizza Protocol soon drew attention beyond their small community. Within months, local news stations began running stories about the program, featuring interviews with Sarah, Chen, and Jennifer, who'd found the courage to tell her story publicly. Each time she spoke about what happened that night, Jennifer's voice grew a little stronger, her message clearer. She wanted other parents to know that, even in the darkest situations, there was a way to protect their children. She wanted them to know that help was out there. And sometimes, it was only a phone call away. The program continued to grow, eventually catching the eye of state officials and advocacy groups. Before long, Sarah was receiving calls from police departments in neighboring towns, asking for guidance on implementing their own versions of the Pizza Protocol. The ripple effect was undeniable, and Sarah felt a deep sense of fulfillment every time she saw the impact of that single 911 call spreading outward, reaching more and more families. As she reflected on everything that had happened, Sarah knew that there was still work to be done. The Pizza Protocol was only the beginning. There were more families to reach, more children to protect. But in the quiet moments, when she thought back to that night, to the soft voice of a 4-year-old asking for a pizza with extra cheese, she felt a profound gratitude. For Tommy, for Jennifer, and for the strength that had led them to this moment. The journey wasn't over, but Sarah was ready for whatever came next. For Tommy, for Jennifer, and for every child who might one day need to call for a very special pizza. Expanding the circle of safety. 2 months had passed since the Pizza Protocol was launched, and its impact was already rippling through the community. Calls from nearby counties were coming in daily, asking for guidance on implementing the protocol. Families were coming to safety workshops in record numbers, and schools were interested in introducing versions of the program to help students feel safe. What had started as a small, experimental initiative, born out of one child's bravery, was transforming into a movement. Sarah and Officer Chen were busier than they'd ever been. They were leading training sessions, meeting with community leaders, and giving presentations at local schools and businesses. They were expanding the network of safe places where children could go if they needed help, with each location proudly displaying the now familiar sticker with the red pizza slice and blue police badge. Tony's Pizzeria became a hub for the program, and it wasn't unusual to see parents and children meeting with police officers over pizza to learn about the protocol. Sarah's personal life had taken a backseat to the project. She spent countless late nights at her desk in the dispatch center, reviewing training materials, refining dispatcher guides, and coordinating with partner organizations. It was exhausting work, but it filled her with a sense of purpose that went far beyond her usual dispatch duties. She was part of something larger, something that would protect vulnerable families long after her shift was over. One night, Sarah was reviewing call records when her phone buzzed. It was Officer Chen. "Hey, Sarah," he said, his tone tinged with excitement. "I just got off the phone with the State Department. They've been following our progress with the Pizza Protocol, and they want to fund an official expansion across the state. They think it could serve as a model program for other emergency services." Sarah felt a rush of excitement and pride. The state's support would mean access to more resources, better training materials, and a chance to reach even more families. But as the initial thrill faded, Sarah realized the added responsibility this would bring. It wasn't just their small community anymore. It was the entire state. They'd need a team to help manage the program, more formalized training, and she swallowed the thought, a system to handle potential failures if something went wrong. "That's incredible," she finally said, her voice steadier than she felt. "But it's also a big step. We'll need to make sure we're ready for this." "We'll figure it out," Chen replied confidently. "We've gotten this far. Let's not stop now." With the state's funding, the Pizza Protocol quickly evolved into a statewide initiative. Sarah and Chen hired a small team of coordinators and trainers to help with the expansion. They brought in social workers, child psychologists, and domestic violence advocates to create a comprehensive program that went beyond emergency calls. Now they were focusing not only on responding to emergencies, but also on teaching parents how to communicate with their children about safety in a way that was empowering rather than frightening. Jennifer became a key part of this expansion. Her first-hand experience, combined with her background as a kindergarten teacher, made her an invaluable asset in developing materials that were approachable for young children. She began speaking at parent workshops, where she shared the story of how she prepared Tommy to call for help, emphasizing that it was possible to teach children about safety without making them feel scared. Kids are smarter and braver than we sometimes realize, she would say, her voice calm and warm. The trick is to make it feel like a game, like a secret mission. That way, they feel in control. They're not afraid. They're prepared. During one of these workshops, a mother approached Jennifer after her presentation, a look of relief mixed with anxiety in her eyes. "I've been so worried about how to talk to my daughter about these things," the woman confessed. "I didn't want her to be afraid, but I didn't know how to keep her safe without scaring her. Hearing you talk about it as a game, that makes so much sense. Thank you." Jennifer gave the woman a reassuring smile. "You're not alone," she replied. "None of us are. That's what this program is all about, making sure we're not doing this alone." As Jennifer became more involved with the program, Sarah noticed a change in her. The quiet, cautious woman she had first met had grown into someone confident and strong, someone who spoke with a quiet authority and a deep compassion that resonated with everyone who heard her. Jennifer had transformed from a survivor into a leader, and Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and awe every time she saw her speak. Meanwhile, the program's reach continued to grow. News stations began running stories about the pizza protocol, interviewing Sarah, Chen, and Jennifer. They showcased the Safe Place Network, the workshops, and the training sessions for dispatchers. Other states began reaching out, asking for guidance on implementing similar protocols, and advocacy groups took notice of the impact the program was having on community safety. As the protocol's visibility increased, so did the demand for resources. Sarah and her team worked tirelessly to develop standardized training materials that could be easily adapted by other states and organizations. They created online courses, videos, and printable guides, all designed to make it as easy as possible for other communities to adopt the protocol. Despite the program's success, Sarah was constantly reminded of the high stakes involved. Every time she heard a new story of a child who used the protocol, she felt a mix of pride and fear. She knew that for every child who successfully called for help, there were others who might not have the chance or the resources. The work was important, but it was also fragile, and Sarah was acutely aware of the responsibility they all bore. One evening, as Sarah was wrapping up a long day of meetings, she received a call from Tony, the pizzeria owner who'd been one of the program's first supporters. "Hey, Sarah," Tony greeted her, his voice warm, but with a hint of urgency. "I had something happen at the restaurant today. A little boy came in, maybe 5 or 6 years old, asking for a special delivery with extra cheese. I remembered the training and followed the protocol. Turns out his mom was in the parking lot with her ex-boyfriend, who wasn't supposed to be there. The police came, and they handled it. But it hit me hard. This is real, isn't it?" Sarah felt a pang of gratitude for Tony's quick thinking and a swell of pride for the network they'd built. "Yes, Tony, it's very real. Thank you for taking it seriously." Tony sighed, the weight of the situation evident in his voice. "You know, when we first put that sticker up, I didn't really think anything would come of it. But after today, I get it. It's more than just a program. It's a safety net. We're making a difference." "Yes, we are," Sarah replied, her voice filled with conviction. "And every person who joins us, every sticker, every workshop, it's all part of building that safety net. Thank you for being part of it." Tony's experience became a turning point for the program. Other businesses took note, and soon, the Safe Place network grew exponentially, expanding to include not only restaurants and cafes, but also libraries, community centers, and retail stores. Each new location went through a brief but thorough training, ensuring that staff knew how to respond to a child using the protocol without alarming anyone who might be watching. As the network grew, so did the stories. Sarah heard about children who had used the pizza protocol to ask for help at grocery stores, in parks, and even at school. Each time, it filled her with a mixture of joy and solemnity. The program was working, but the need for it was greater than she had ever anticipated. One of the most moving cases came when a 7-year-old girl named Ellie used the protocol to call for help while hiding in a dressing room at a clothing store. Her father had violated a restraining order and had followed her and her mother into the store. Ellie remembered what she'd learned about the pizza protocol in her school's safety assembly and used her mother's phone to call 911, asking for a special pizza with extra cheese. The dispatcher, who had recently completed the pizza protocol training, immediately recognized the code and kept Ellie on the line while dispatching officers to the store. They arrived just in time, intercepting her father before he could reach her. Ellie's story made headlines, and Sarah was invited to meet the young girl at a local community event. When she arrived, she found Ellie standing with her mother, a shy but proud smile on her face as she clutched a certificate of bravery that the police department had given her. "Hi, Ellie." Sarah greeted her warmly, kneeling down to meet her at eye level. "I'm so proud of you. You were so brave, and you helped keep your mom safe too. How does it feel to be a hero?" Ellie's cheeks turned pink, and she looked at her mother before answering. "I was scared, but I remembered what you taught us at school. You said if we need help, we can ask for pizza, and someone will come." Sarah felt a lump form in her throat as she reached out to take Ellie's hand. "That's right, Ellie, and you remembered exactly what to do. You're amazing." Ellie smiled shyly, and her mother stepped forward, her voice filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Sarah. I don't know what we would have done without this program. It saved us." As Sarah walked away from the event that evening, she felt an overwhelming sense of purpose. The program had grown beyond anything she'd imagined, touching lives in ways she hadn't dared to hope for when she first answered Tommy's call. Back at the dispatch center that night, Sarah sat alone, looking over the cases where the pizza protocol had been used successfully. Each story was a testament to the bravery of the children who had called for help and to the resilience of the parents who had prepared them. It was a reminder of why she did this work, why every late night and every meeting was worth it. Just as she was about to log off, an email notification popped up on her screen. It was from a neighboring state's emergency services department, asking for a consultation on implementing the pizza protocol in their own dispatch centers. Sarah smiled, feeling a renewed sense of determination. She opened her notebook and began drafting a response, laying out the steps for building a network of safe places, creating training materials, and launching workshops for families. She knew it would be hard work, but she also knew it was the right work. As she closed her notebook and prepared to head home, she glanced one last time at the screen, at the list of names and places where the pizza protocol had made a difference. She thought of Tommy, of Jennifer, of Ellie, and all the others whose lives had been touched by the program. And she knew, deep in her heart, that this was only the beginning. The circle of safety they had built was expanding, reaching out to protect more children, more families, and more communities. And with each new story, each new success, Sarah's resolve only grew stronger. They were building something that would last, something that would keep children safe and remind them that even in the darkest moments, there was always someone ready to answer the call for help. This was the power of the pizza protocol, and this was only the beginning of what it would become. Facing challenges and broadening horizons, a year into the program, the pizza protocol had become a success story, making headlines across the state and gaining the support of law enforcement, schools, businesses, and advocacy groups. The program was now a model of community-based safety, teaching children a safe way to ask for help, and providing a network of trained responders and safe locations across their city and beyond. Sarah, Officer Chen, Jennifer, and the rest of the team felt both pride and a renewed sense of purpose, but they also knew there were challenges ahead. The more they expanded, the more they faced the complexity of making the program sustainable and keeping it effective. One afternoon, Sarah sat in a small conference room with Officer Chen, Jennifer, and Linda, her supervisor. They were preparing for a call with the State Department, which had been closely following the program's progress. The department was interested in expanding the pizza protocol even further, possibly implementing it on a national scale. But while this was exciting, it was also daunting, and Sarah knew they needed to address a few pressing issues before they could move forward. "I'm proud of everything we've accomplished," Linda began, her voice measured, "but we need to acknowledge the limitations we've encountered as well. We've seen success, yes, but we've also run into obstacles. And if we're talking about taking this national, we need to find solutions." Officer Chen leaned forward, nodding in agreement. "We've been doing a great job locally, but scalability is another story. Other states will have different needs, and not all dispatch centers have the resources to train their staff as extensively as we have. We've already received feedback from some dispatchers who feel that picking up on subtle codes, especially in high-stress situations, is more challenging than we realized." Sarah nodded, acknowledging the concern. She'd been thinking about this issue for months. She knew that what worked well in a smaller, close-knit community might not work as easily in a larger, more fragmented system. They'd also run into cases where dispatchers missed cues from children because they were overwhelmed with calls, or because they weren't trained to notice the subtleties of a coded request for help. Jennifer, who had become one of the most vocal advocates for the program, spoke up. "We can't control every aspect of the system, but what if we focus on making the training more accessible? Maybe there's a way to simplify the process so that even in high-stress environments, dispatchers know what to look for without second-guessing themselves." Linda tapped her fingers thoughtfully on the table. "You're right. We need to create a streamlined training model that can be adopted widely without a lot of specialized resources. And we should consider building a network of certified trainers who can go into other communities to conduct in-person training, especially in rural areas where dispatch centers may be smaller or under-resourced." Sarah's mind was already racing with ideas. They needed to make sure that the protocol wasn't diluted, that it retained its effectiveness, and focus on safety. But they also needed to be realistic about the limitations of the system. The training would have to be streamlined, and the code words might need to be made more flexible to adapt to different regions and local cultures. Another issue Sarah had been grappling with was the risk of abusers learning about the protocol. As more people became aware of it, there was a chance that the very people they were trying to protect children from would recognize the code words and prevent kids from using them. This had been a point of contention in their recent meetings, and it was something they couldn't ignore as the program expanded. "Here's another challenge," Sarah said, glancing around the table. "As word of the protocol spreads, there's a risk that abusers might catch on and recognize the code. We've heard from some families who worry that their kids won't be able to use it safely if the abuser knows what the code means." Chen nodded, his expression serious. "It's a valid concern. We've been dealing with domestic violence cases long enough to know that abusers can be unpredictable and can pick up on even the smallest signals. We need to figure out a way to address this." Linda looked thoughtful. "What if we develop a series of rotating code words or phrases that can change periodically? For example, we could train dispatchers to respond to different phrases every few months. It would require some coordination, but it might help keep the protocol effective even if it becomes more widely known." Sarah considered this idea, already thinking about the logistics involved. Rotating code words would add an extra layer of protection, but it would also require additional coordination between the dispatch centers, schools, and safe places. They'd need to create a system for updating and distributing the new phrases without compromising security. Jennifer, who had been listening quietly, spoke up again. What if we also empower families to come up with their own specific code words? That way, each family has a unique phrase they can use, one that won't be as easily recognized by others. We could give them guidelines on how to create safe and memorable phrases, but it would add an extra layer of security. Sarah nodded, a feeling of excitement bubbling up within her. Yes, that could work. Families could personalize the protocol to their own needs, and it would make the program more flexible for different situations. We could also use examples from the original protocol as a guide, but give families the freedom to adapt it as they see fit. The team continued to brainstorm solutions, and by the end of the meeting, they had a rough plan in place. They would create a streamlined training model, implement a rotating set of code words, and encourage families to develop their own unique phrases. It was an ambitious plan, but it felt achievable, and Sarah was filled with a renewed sense of purpose. Over the next few months, they worked tirelessly to put these changes into action. They created an online training portal that included video modules, role-playing exercises, and a certification program for dispatchers. The training was broken down into manageable sections, making it easier for dispatchers to learn and retain the information. They also developed a system for rotating the code words, distributing new phrases to dispatch centers, schools, and participating businesses on a secure password-protected platform. As they implemented these changes, they encountered unexpected challenges. Some families struggled with creating their own code words, feeling overwhelmed by the responsibility. To address this, Jennifer led workshops where she taught parents how to come up with simple, child-friendly phrases that were easy for kids to remember, but difficult for outsiders to guess. She used examples from her own experience, sharing stories of how she had worked with Tommy to develop a language they both understood. One evening, Jennifer stood in front of a group of parents, holding a stuffed dinosaur, Tommy's favorite toy, under her arm. She smiled as she shared stories of the games she created to make safety training feel fun and empowering. When I first started teaching Tommy about the protocol, I wanted him to feel like he was in control, she explained. So we made it into a game, something exciting and positive. It wasn't about being scared, it was about being a superhero. Your kids can feel the same way. Just find a phrase that feels natural to you and make it part of a game they enjoy. The parents listened intently, many of them nodding as they absorbed her advice. Afterward, several of them approached Jennifer, thanking her for giving them the tools to have these conversations with their children. As the program continued to grow, Sarah and the team encountered another challenge. The sheer volume of requests for training and resources. Schools, police departments, businesses, and advocacy organizations from across the country were reaching out, asking for guidance on implementing the pizza protocol in their own communities. Sarah and Chen were both overwhelmed by the demand, and they knew they needed help to keep up. To address this, they began recruiting a network of certified trainers, volunteers from law enforcement, social work, and education who could conduct training sessions and serve as local advocates for the program. The trainers were carefully selected and underwent rigorous training to ensure they understood the protocol's nuances and could adapt it to different communities. Sarah felt a deep sense of gratitude for these individuals, many of whom were volunteering their time and expertise to help protect children and support families in need. One of the most dedicated volunteers was a woman named Carla, a former teacher who had lost her own daughter to domestic violence years earlier. Carla's personal experience gave her a powerful connection to the program, and she approached each training session with a quiet determination that inspired everyone around her. Sarah quickly came to rely on Carla's expertise and compassion, and the two women developed a close friendship as they worked together. Carla's involvement proved invaluable when they began piloting the program in rural areas. She understood the unique challenges faced by families in isolated communities, where resources were limited, and reaching help in an emergency could be difficult. Under Carla's guidance, the program developed specific adaptations for rural families, including a network of safe houses and local businesses that could serve as safe places. As the pizza protocol expanded into these new areas, Sarah and her team encountered both support and resistance. While many community leaders welcomed the program, some were skeptical, questioning whether it would be effective in their unique circumstances. Sarah spent countless hours in meetings, explaining the protocol, sharing success stories, and addressing concerns. It was challenging work, and there were times when she felt frustrated by the slow pace of progress. But for every obstacle they faced, there were moments of validation. Stories of children who had used the protocol to escape dangerous situations, families who felt empowered to create safety plans, and communities that rallied together to support the program. One such story came from a small town where a boy named Lucas used the protocol to call for help during a dangerous incident involving his mother's ex-boyfriend. Lucas had attended one of the school assemblies where the protocol was introduced, and he remembered the steps he learned. He called 911, asking for a pizza with extra cheese, and the dispatcher, who had recently completed the training, recognized the code. Police arrived within minutes, and Lucas and his mother were safely removed from the situation. The local news picked up the story, and Sarah received a heartfelt email from Lucas's mother, thanking her for the program. She'd included a picture of Lucas holding a pizza, smiling shyly at the camera. Reading the email, Sarah felt an overwhelming sense of fulfillment and pride. Every late night, every difficult conversation, every logistical headache had been worth it. By the end of the second year, the pizza protocol had become a national movement, with communities across the country adopting the program and adapting it to their unique needs. Sarah had grown from a 911 dispatcher into a national advocate for child safety, and the program had taken on a life of its own. Jennifer and Officer Chen remained by her side, each of them contributing their unique strengths and perspectives to the initiative. Together, they had built something extraordinary, a network of safety, resilience, and hope. As Sarah prepared for another presentation, this time at a national child safety conference, she reflected on the journey they had taken. It had started with a single call, a frightened little boy asking for a pizza, and it had grown into something that reached across cities, towns, and rural communities, touching countless lives. The challenges had been immense, but so had the rewards. Sarah knew they still had work to do, but she also knew that they had built a foundation that would last. The pizza protocol was no longer just a program. It was a movement, a reminder that even in the face of fear and adversity, there was always a way to call for help, a way to find safety. And as she stood at the podium that day, looking out at the faces of hundreds of parents, teachers, police officers, and advocates, Sarah felt a profound sense of gratitude. They were all part of something larger than themselves, something that would continue to grow and evolve, helping to keep children safe for generations to come. This was the power of community, the power of resilience, and the power of a single voice, a small voice, calling for pizza. And it was only the beginning. A legacy of hope. 3 years after the first call that sparked the pizza protocol, Sarah Martinez found herself standing on a stage in Washington, D.C., in front of a crowd of lawmakers, police officers, child advocacy leaders, and representatives from communities across the country. She was at the annual Child Protection Summit, where the pizza protocol had been nominated for a national award recognizing its impact on community safety and child welfare. It was a moment she could hardly believe had arrived, and yet she knew this was only one chapter in an ongoing story. As Sarah gazed at the audience, she thought of all the people who had contributed to the protocol's success. Officer Chen, who had been with her from the beginning, tirelessly advocating and expanding the program. Jennifer, whose courage had set the foundation for it all, and who was now a leading speaker on trauma-informed child safety. Tony, whose pizzeria became the program's first safe place and a symbol of community protection. And Carla, the volunteer who had worked tirelessly to bring the protocol to rural communities and had become one of Sarah's closest friends. They had all woven their lives into the fabric of this movement, creating a legacy that extended far beyond their individual contributions. Sarah took a deep breath and began her speech, her voice steady but filled with emotion. 3 years ago, a little boy called 911 asking for a pizza with extra cheese. What sounded like a prank turned out to be a coded call for help. His bravery and his mother's foresight became the inspiration for what we now call the Pizza Protocol. Since then, that one call has transformed how we approach child safety, proving that even in the most dire situations, there's always a way to ask for help. As she continued, Sarah shared stories of children across the country who had used the protocol. She talked about Lucas, the boy who had called from a small-town grocery store, and Ellie, who'd hidden in a dressing room and dialed 911. She recounted the story of young Lucy, who had learned about the protocol online and used it to save herself and her siblings, making the protocol a lifeline for children in situations where words alone might have failed them. The crowd was silent, many visibly moved by the stories of courage and resilience. But the Pizza Protocol is more than just a safety plan. Sarah continued. It's a reminder that every child deserves to feel safe and protected. And that safety isn't just about what we can do in a moment of crisis. It's about building communities where children know they can reach out without fear. As she wrapped up her speech, Sarah felt a profound sense of gratitude and pride. The applause was thunderous, but her thoughts were already turning to what was next. She knew this award was just the beginning of what they could achieve. They still had families to reach, schools to train, and more voices to uplift. But today, the Pizza Protocol had taken a step toward becoming a nationwide initiative, a symbol of hope and safety. After the summit, Sarah met with leaders from various agencies to discuss the protocol's future. With the award came funding opportunities that would allow them to expand even further, but there were also new challenges. The program would need a sustainable structure, a national database, and partnerships with technology companies to keep it effective and secure. One of the more pressing issues they faced was the need for a centralized, standardized database to track the safe places, code words, and training updates for the program. As it stood, each state was implementing its own version of the Pizza Protocol, but there was no national system to monitor its reach, effectiveness, or adapt to evolving threats. Sarah knew they needed to create a foundation for the program that would allow it to grow without losing its integrity. To tackle this, Sarah and her team formed a partnership with a technology company known for its work in public safety. Together, they began developing an app that would allow dispatch centers, schools, and certified safe places to communicate securely and update code words periodically. Parents could register their families with the program, creating unique, private code words known only to the emergency services in their area. This app would make it easier for families in rural and urban communities alike to access the protocol and ensure their children's safety, no matter where they were. While Sarah worked on implementing this national database, Jennifer took on a new role as an official ambassador for the program. Her voice and story resonated with countless families, and she traveled the country, sharing the Pizza Protocol's message of hope and resilience. In every city she visited, Jennifer connected with parents, children, and survivors of domestic violence, offering guidance on how to prepare for emergencies without instilling fear. One evening, Jennifer gave a speech to a group of parents at a community center in Chicago. She talked openly about her journey, about the fear she had lived with, and the strength she had found in teaching her son how to ask for help. When we empower our children to be safe, she told the audience, we give them more than protection. We give them confidence and resilience. They don't have to feel powerless. They can be brave, even in the face of fear. After her speech, a mother approached Jennifer with tears in her eyes. She explained that she'd been living with an abusive partner, but had always hesitated to leave, fearing the impact on her children. Listening to Jennifer had given her the courage to create a safety plan for her family, and she felt ready to reach out for help. Jennifer embraced her, feeling a deep connection that transcended words. It was moments like this that reminded her why she had decided to share her story, despite the pain of reliving those memories. While Jennifer was on the road, Carla continued her work with the protocol's rural outreach. She had developed a network of safe houses and community centers in remote areas, creating safety trails where children could go from one safe place to another if they were in danger. Her experience with the program had been transformative, turning her personal loss into a force for change. Carla's work led to a breakthrough when she received a call from a family in a rural town where emergency services were minimal. The mother explained that her daughter had used the protocol while staying with her grandparents in a remote area. The family had been fearful that no one would respond, but thanks to Carla's network, help arrived within minutes, transported by a local volunteer who had been trained through the program. The success of Carla's safety trails garnered attention from rural communities nationwide, and soon, her approach became a blueprint for implementing the protocol in remote areas. Carla's experience and dedication had created a new branch of the program, one that would ensure children everywhere, regardless of location, had access to safety. Meanwhile, Officer Chen, who had been Sarah's partner from the beginning, focused on expanding the law enforcement aspect of the program. He worked closely with police departments, training officers to recognize coded requests for help and creating guidelines for safe response protocols. Chen's efforts led to the development of child advocate units within police departments, teams of officers specially trained to handle cases involving children and families in crisis. These advocates became instrumental in the program's success, offering a compassionate, child-centered approach to law enforcement that built trust within the community. One of Chen's most memorable cases involved a young girl named Bella, who had been taught the pizza protocol at school. Bella had called 911 from her family's apartment, asking for a pizza with everything on it. The dispatcher, trained through Chen's program, kept her on the line and quickly sent help. When the officers arrived, they found Bella's father, a man with a history of violent behavior, attempting to break down the bathroom door where Bella and her younger brother were hiding. The officers intervened, and Bella and her brother were brought to safety. The story reached national news, highlighting the critical role of child advocates and strengthening the call for similar units across the country. As the program grew, so did its impact. By the end of its third year, the pizza protocol had been implemented in over half of the states in the U.S., and each year brought more requests from communities wanting to join. Sarah and her team had built an infrastructure that allowed the program to adapt to new challenges, while staying true to its mission of protecting children and empowering families. On the third anniversary of the pizza protocol, Sarah and her team held a celebration at Tony's Pizzeria, the place where it had all begun. The room was filled with families, police officers, teachers, and children, some of whom had used the protocol to ask for help, while others had helped spread its message. Tony himself was there, beaming with pride, and he had brought his entire staff to share in the moment. As Sarah looked around the room, she saw Tommy, now 7 years old, wearing a small badge that read Junior Safety Ambassador. He was laughing with his friends, holding a slice of pizza, completely unaware of the lives he'd changed. Jennifer stood nearby, watching her son with a look of quiet pride. She caught Sarah's eye and gave her a small nod, a silent acknowledgement of everything they'd achieved together. During the celebration, Sarah took the stage to give a short speech, her voice filled with gratitude. This program began with a single call, a brave little boy, and a mother who taught him how to ask for help. What started as a moment of crisis has grown into a movement of hope and safety. The pizza protocol isn't just a program. It's a promise to every child, every family, and every community that they don't have to face danger alone. Together, we are building a legacy of hope, one that will continue long after tonight. The applause that followed was deafening, but Sarah's mind was already drifting to the future. She knew the work wasn't done, that there would always be new challenges, new communities to reach, and more children to protect. But she also knew they had built something that would last. The pizza protocol was more than a call for help. It was a symbol of resilience, bravery, and the power of community. As the celebration continued, Sarah found herself standing next to Tommy, who looked up at her with a proud smile. "Did I really save people?" he asked, his voice filled with innocent curiosity. Sarah knelt down, meeting his gaze. "Yes, Tommy. You saved so many people. You're a hero." He grinned, and Jennifer joined them, placing a hand on her son's shoulder. "You know," she said softly, "it wasn't just the pizza that helped. It was the people who cared enough to listen." Sarah felt a surge of gratitude for the journey that had brought them here, for every late night, every meeting, every person who had joined the program and given their all to make it a success. The pizza protocol had grown into something far beyond what any of them had envisioned. It was a legacy of hope, and it would continue to protect children, empower families, and strengthen communities for generations to come. In that moment, Sarah knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Because this wasn't just a program, it was a movement, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there was always a way to ask for help, a way to find safety. And it all began with a little boy who ordered a pizza with extra cheese.